I woke up while nature was sound asleep, so I could marvel at its kingdom. I strolled through its lush gardens and saw every little wonder up close. Here, you can dance with giants, discover a feast for the eyes, and a feast for the appetite. Walls that hold heroes' stories told me of their bravery, while sacred places blessed my journey. I roamed places that stood the test of time, and others that were there since the beginning.
Once I woke up in a hidden place. Paradise unlike anything I had ever seen, and not the kind from fantasy, but one you could really sink your toes into. I walked beaches few had ever walked before, while the waves whispered their secrets. This place was my buried treasure. And even though I couldn't stay forever, the story of the islands never leaves me.
I just woke up in a non-stop action scene where we're always at the edge of our seats, defying gravity one moment to communing with giants and getting lost in the lights the next. After feeling the heat, and I mean really feeling the heat, we finally regained our balance. And found our epic finale.
Today, I woke up below the surface, where I learned to face my fears and go with the flow. But it's when I came to appreciate the big and the small. Made new friends from all over, and could no longer hide my true colors, that I knew I'd emerged a local.
Makalibay, no?
Today I woke up inside a kaleidoscope. Surrounded by mesmerizing patterns and vibrant shades. Golden colors you can practically taste. An endless stretch of powdery pink sand. Rainbow vessels riding gentle waves. A Technicolor dream just bursting at the seams. With ever-changing hues and views. But no fail, always a whole lot of fun.
I woke up inside an artist's dream. Where the paintings dance with every brushstroke, and works of art span from floor to ceiling. I witness masters at their craft who transform even the ordinary into exceptional. Confections came in more colors than I could imagine, and a creative escape waited around every corner.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. To our distinguished guests, our dear audience, welcome to today's webinar entitled A Study on Filipino Travelers' Sentiments on the New Normal. I am Ayla Gutierrez, Research Manager of the Asian Institute of Management, Dr. Andrew L. Tan Center for Tourism, and I will be your virtual MC for today's event. This webinar was made possible through the collaboration of the Department of Tourism, Guide to the Philippines, the Asian Institute of Management, Dr. Andrew L. Tan Center for Tourism, and the AIM School of Executive Education and Lifelong Learning. Now, to formally open today's webinar, it is our pleasure to have with us Secretary Bernadette Romulo Puyat to deliver a message from the Department of Tourism. Bernadette Fatima Romulo Puyat is the current Secretary of the Department of Tourism after being appointed by President Rodrigo Duterte in 2018. She attended the University of the Philippines and pursued an undergraduate and master's degree in economics. Let us welcome Secretary Puyat.
Professor Fernando Martin Rojas, Executive Director, AIM, Andrew Tan Center for Tourism. Dr. Maria Sherry Lynn Rodolfo, Advisory Board Member, AIM, Andrew L. Tan Center for Tourism. Assistant Secretary Roberto Alabado III, Tourism Development Planning, Department of Tourism. Assistant Secretary Howard Oy King, Branding of the Department of Tourism, Jose C. Clemente III, President of the Tourism Congress of the Philippines, Mariglo Laririt, Head of Environment and Sustainability Initiatives, El Nido Resorts, Jose Enrique Perez de Tagle, Vice President, Corporate Communications, Philippine Airlines, our partners from Guide to the Philippines. Good morning to you all and to everyone tuned in today. All our partners in the tourism industry, tourism enterprise operators, stakeholders, friends from the media, thank you for attending today's webinar. The Philippine Travel Survey, a study on Filipino traveler sentiments on the new normal. I am pleased to introduce the results and discoveries of the domestic travel survey that the Department of Tourism conducted from May 8th to the 22nd. We have experienced firsthand that the tourism industry was one of the sectors that was the hardest hit by the extended quarantine measures. MSMEs, which comprise a majority of the industry, were impacted, and even large-scale properties were not immune to the effects of the pandemic. In times of uncertainty, having data on consumer sentiments and behavior is critical for industry stakeholders to craft strategies and plan for the new normal. The DOT, in collaboration with Guide to the Philippines and the Asian Institute of Management, Andrew L. Tan Center for Tourism, launched the Philippine Travel Survey to complement our existing initiatives. The survey, which was distributed online, sought the sentiments and concerns that respondents have concerning domestic travel in light of the pandemic in order to provide insights to tourism enterprises to better prepare, respond, and serve guests and tourists under the new normal. And once travel restrictions are lifted all around the country and all over the world. In this webinar, we will discuss key insights gathered from 12,732 Filipinos and other nationalities residing across 81 provinces in the Philippines. Domestic tourism will be the #1 driver of reviving the industry, particularly so for the Philippines, where domestic tourism expanded from 2.85 trillion in 2018 to 3.14 trillion in 2019. It's worth noting that about 10.8% of the 12.7% contribution to GDP share is from domestic tourism, making it the biggest contributor to the tourism industry. Domestic tourism expenditure also represents 22% of the household final consumption expenditure. Also in 2019, domestic trips have gone up by 11.26%. We should therefore take into consideration the preferences of local travelers and understand how they will make decisions when it comes to traveling in a post-pandemic world. Until international borders open up again, our industry will depend on domestic travel to kickstart recovery. Many of our regions are already under a modified GCQ, and domestic travel can be facilitated among these areas, provided that establishments and enterprises adhere to the new normal protocols developed by the Department of Tourism and the Department of Health. Let me reiterate that accommodation establishments are required to obtain a certificate of authority to operate prior to reopening. Physical distancing, sanitation procedures, and temperature screenings is now the new normal. This is to assure the safety of both guests and employees and to help prevent another wave of infection or future viral outbreaks of any kind. As weeks and months go by, the confidence and desire to travel will continue to grow. And we acknowledge that a slow but sure approach is the best way our destinations will be ready and capable to receive guests under the new normal. The DOT endeavors to provide all the support it can give to tourism enterprises to regain the capability and lead travelers to regain that trust. We believe in a collaborative approach to recovery. This joint project of launching a survey is an example of how the government, the private sector, and the academe can work together in support of the industry. We hope you take away valuable insights and learnings from the results of this survey and incorporate them into your operation and practices. I have faith that we will bounce back as we will all work together to overcome the current challenges our industry faces. Please stay until the end of the session to be part of our online conversation. Maraming salamat at mabuhay po kayong lahat.
Thank you, Secretary Puyat. And now to deliver a message from the AIM Dr. Andrew L. Tan Center for Tourism and to introduce the AIM School of Executive Education and Lifelong Learning, I would like to call on Dr. Maria Cherilyn S. Rodolfo, Advisory Board Member and Adjunct Faculty of the Asian Institute of Management and a consultant at the Department of Tourism.
Good morning, Secretary Bernadette Romulo Puyat, Assistant Secretaries Alabado and Uy-King, distinguished speakers and panelists and webinar participants. On behalf of the Board of Advisors of the Asian Institute of Management, Dr. Andrew L. Tan Center for Tourism, and our Chairman and Founder, Secretary Jesly Lapus, I would like to welcome all of you to this webinar entitled A Study of the Filipino Traveler's Sentiments on the New Normal. This is our collaboration with the Department of Tourism, Guide to the Philippines, and the School of Executive Education and Lifelong Learning, the executive development arm of AIM. With it, we provide leading-edge, differentiated, and results-oriented executive education programs. These programs build managerial and leadership capabilities and enable participants to become lifelong learners in their organizations and communities. Today's webinar aims to contribute to the ongoing discussions and dialogue on how the tourism industry can safely reboot and recover. Tourism's safe and sustainable recovery is a major pillar of our nation's recovery. In 2019, as highlighted by Secretary Romulo Puyat earlier, tourism accounted for 12.7% of our Philippine national output and 13.7% of national employment. The industry employed 5.7 million Filipinos across the value chain, including accommodation, transport, retail, tour operations, among others. With the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, governments, private sectors, and international organizations have worked together to develop safety protocols and provide assistance packages. With the international travel restrictions mostly still in place, domestic travel has been identified to lead the industry in the road to recovery, be it short or long and winding. So in today's webinar, we therefore turn our attention to ourselves as Filipino domestic travelers and potential travelers and ask these questions. Are we indeed ready to travel again? Why or why not? When, where, and how? We acknowledge the impacts also of the economic challenges around us. Through the study and this webinar, we aim to engage you in the discussion of the readiness, intentions, preferences, and confidence barometer of Filipino travelers. We only aim to share information to our stakeholders, enterprises, communities, government, academe, to name a few, as they prepare for and navigate under the new normal. We all look forward to happy travel moments again. We've been aspiring, we've been dreaming of this for months, but we also recognize that this will happen at the right time and at the safe time for each one of us. So for this morning, let us just discover the sentiments of Filipinos about travel and the impacts of COVID-19 on travel behavior in general. And thank you very much for registering in this webinar, and please participate in the discussions and the dialogue later. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rodolfo. Now, for the information of our audience, today's webinar will proceed as follows. First will be the presentation of the survey results, followed by the sharing of insights by our reactors, and finally, we hear from you, our audience, through our question and answer portion. Now, a copy of the report containing the survey results will be provided through a link which will be shared later on, towards the end of the program. Now, please make sure to post your questions at the Q&A panel of Zoom. so I, along with the speakers, can view them. You may also want to address questions specific to panelists. Help us choose questions to be answered by hitting the thumbs up button or the icon to the corresponding questions. Now, without further ado, we will proceed with the presentation of results from the recently conducted survey, the Philippine Travel Survey Insights on Filipino Travelers' Sentiments on the New Normal, which gathered a total of 12,732 respondents. Now, to present the results, I would like to call on Mr. Rabi Vincent L. Ang, General Manager of the Guide to the Philippines, and Dr. John Paulo R. Rivera, Associate Director of the AIM Dr. Andrew L. Tan Center for Tourism.
Okay, good morning, everyone. So together with Rabi here, we would be presenting to you the results of our Philippine Travel Survey conducted last May. And in this presentation, we'll provide you with information on this initiative, description of our respondents, key insights and implications for tourism enterprises. Now, we acknowledge that traveling right now may not be the most viable option as we are still in the process of managing the pandemic, but we need to look into the future. Our collective efforts now as a nation will allow us to contain the pandemic as soon as possible and prepare to move us forward in the new normal. So it is our hope that in this webinar, as well as the full survey report that you will be receiving after this webinar, would stimulate richer discourses among tourism stakeholders and that it helps everyone in the industry recover and adapt to the changes brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. And as a background, our survey results aim to answer the following questions. So when will domestic travel demand most likely return and at what rate? What conditions may trigger Filipinos to start traveling again? What measures or business process changes do I need to put in place as a tourism stakeholder or enterprise to increase traveler confidence in my services? And what are travelers' tolerances to these additional safety measures? Now, our results may provide tourism stakeholders and enterprises insights and perspectives useful in planning for the new normal, for travel within the country specifically. And at the same time, implications can be beneficial in scenario planning for future crisis and pandemic management. And on all levels of planning, it is to answer the question of how to resume operations in this new normal and revive travel demand using a variety of assumptions. Now, our respondents in this survey, we are truly grateful for the support that you have given with us when we launched the survey last May 15 to 24, 2020 on various online platforms. And with your responses to our call in helping us shape the future of Philippine travel, we were able to gather 12,732 respondents composed of Filipino travelers and foreign residents residing in the Philippines from 81 provinces. And to give you a better picture of our respondents, 60% of respondents are within 22 to 40 years old, very millennial. 47% are private sector employees. 27% of them earn within 20,000 to 40,000 pesos per month. And it is also interesting to note that 98% of our respondents have college degrees, of which 30% have postgraduate degrees or at least a master's degree, indicating the degree of education and language sophistication of our travelers. And in terms of their general travel behaviors or preferences, 46% of our respondents spend an average of 2 to 3 days for domestic leisure trips. It is also important to note that 50% cited 4 or more days duration for typical domestic leisure trips. 74% travel in groups of 2 to 5. Most of the respondents travel with family or relatives, 68% of that, and 61% travel with friends and coworkers. And also, 29% allocate 1,000 to 2,000 pesos per person per day for accommodation, transport, food, and other activities. And respondents usually spend approximately an average of 3,000 to 6,000 pesos per head for a 2 to 3 day leisure trip, and they travel in groups of 2 to 5, again, either with family or relatives or friends and coworkers for their domestic leisure trips. Now, therefore, we can construe that around 45% of total Filipino travelers are willing to travel post-COVID. And also, we can also imply that market segment here is simply the relatives or the barkada niche. And in the course of crunching your responses to the survey and generating descriptive statistics, by the way, we would also like to acknowledge the comments that you have left in the options. Please specify. So they were very reflective of your pulse to the tourism industry given the pandemic. We were able to generate 6 key insights that we believe that would be helpful for tourism enterprises in moving towards the new normal. And I am pleased to present to you the first 3 key insights. Now, the first key insight from the survey result is that domestic leisure travel will lead Philippine tourism recovery. So with the closure of international borders, the return of foreign tourists is expected to be slow and very gradual. So a possible silver lining, if I may use that term, for the tourism industry lies with domestic travelers. And as the survey results indicated, their quick return to leisure travel would happen once the restrictions are lifted, meaning those GCQs, MGCQ, all those Qs, once they're lifted, this will be the expected behavior of travelers. And despite the current situation, survey results show that greater confidence on the probability of domestic travel within 6 months from lifting of restrictions. I would like to emphasize on that, as compared to international travel. So we can see here now that 48% of our respondents expect to travel domestically within 6 months from lifting of travel restrictions. Domestic travel demand show a potential for a quick recovery, given that 77% of people are willing to travel domestically even in the absence of a vaccine. Meanwhile, only 26% expect to travel internationally within the next 6 months. Travelers also indicated a preference for travel to nearby countries, with 37% planning to travel to East Asia, meaning China, Japan, Korea, Hong Kong, Macau, while 30% of respondents plan to travel within the ASEAN region, from Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, Laos, Indonesia, Cambodia, and Brunei, once restrictions are lifted. And leisure travel would still remain to be the primary reason for travel among Filipinos and those foreigners residing in the country. Of those expecting to travel once restrictions are lifted, most expect their first trip to be a vacation. Actually, with a stressful quarantine period and being cooped up for approximately 1/3 of the year, staying at home to help contain the virus, I think everyone deserves a change of scenery. Visiting family and friends would also come in second. Not being separated from your families during the quarantine period, it would be great to be reunited again. Now, domestic travel spend is significantly higher than inbound travel spend. Now, due to the significant difference in the volume of domestic tourists compared to foreign tourists, our local travel industry is largely propped up by our fellow Filipinos. In fact, in the 2018 and 2019 tourism satellite accounts, approximately 88% of tourism receipts were generated by the domestic tourism industry. And indeed, based from our first key findings, domestic leisure travel will lead or can lead Philippine tourism recovery. And from this figure alone, it is safe to say that it is domestic tourism that propelled the contribution of tourism to our economy. And that's how important tourism is to our economy. Now, for our second key insight, travelers expect a reduction in income and travel budget. And beyond the heightened health and safety risks imposed by government, the economic repercussion of the pandemic and the community quarantine restrictions appear to be far-reaching. Only 26% of respondents expect no reduction in their income. Interestingly, when asked about their expected travel budget during this time, 44% indicated that they would reduce it instead of completely zeroing it out. So later, you will see a distribution of where travelers are heading, where travelers are going, and where are they coming from. Because the reduction in budget can be explained by their propensity to travel to destinations that are close to them for the meantime. Perhaps those accessible by land transportation, most likely. Well, they have been at home for quite some time, and getting out is one of the certain urges that travelers would want to do. And the closer the destination, the less budget will be allocated. And another reason that we're seeing why expected travel is reduced is due to an expected reduction in income, as what I have mentioned in the previous slide. And statistically speaking, so just playing around with correlation here, there is a positive correlation between income and travel budget. So for the rudiments of that, we can talk about that some other time. However, while many expect to spend on travel, the general market sentiment indicates that it is still not the appropriate time to promote travel deals, because 42% of our travelers are highly unlikely to purchase travel deals or promotions during this time. This can be attributed to their concerns on safety, expected reduction in income, and certain travel restrictions. One possible reason driving this result is travelers' concern on safety and the current uncertainty in the market. Now, unless the travel arrangements can be guaranteed to be flexible or easy to alter at minimum cost, it would be a challenge to make them buy for now. From this, in moving towards the new normal, we always have to consider ensuring safety and managing uncertainty. So there. For our third key insight, it is about health and safety is the primary concern of travelers. Travelers are mostly concerned with the health and safety of others and themselves. Safety remains to be the top concern over the economic and lifestyle-related concerns. It is interesting to note that responses indicate a greater concern for the welfare of others more than personal welfare. For example, we can see from this slide that there is greater concern over loved ones contracting the virus versus personally contracting it. Similarly, the impact on the vulnerable members of society is more concerning to respondents than the impact on one's own home. That is very sweet of our Filipino brothers and sisters. It is because, maybe the cliche would say that we are all in this together. And although majority do not see the COVID-19 situation improving, the perception is not conclusive given the distribution of the proportions. 37% of travelers indicate that the situation will worsen in a month's time. 34% thought that the situation will neither improve nor worsen, and 29% felt that the situation will improve. But despite this finding, medical milestones will trigger comfort in returning to old lifestyle or our old travel behavior. Most travelers would only feel comfortable returning to their old routine once epidemiological concerns have been addressed. Now, while a proven treatment or vaccine are key significant milestones, reduced rate of infections or number of cases are also indicators that could trigger behavioral changes towards traveling. Sanitation and health best practices are expected by travelers. The pandemic has clearly raised traveler expectation on health and safety standards. And with that, travelers are willing to adhere to health and safety protocols. Majority of the travelers are willing to follow the necessary health and safety policies, except for undergoing quarantine at a government facility. But nonetheless, as long as the safety protocols are in place, our travelers would be willing to comply with it. And for the next three key findings, I would like to turn you over now to Rabi.
Thank you, JP. Good morning, everyone. So while the first three findings tackled more of the general sentiments of Filipino travelers during this period of pandemic, the next three provides us deeper insights around the probable travel behavior once the situation allows for the return of leisure travel. So where will local travelers go? What activities will they prefer? How will they interact with travel vendors? These are but some of the questions we hope to shed some light on this part of the report. So the next key insight is that travelers prefer reduced contact activities once leisure travel restrictions are lifted. So in the survey, we had a couple of questions about the activities that travelers would feel safe doing and what they feel are the first things that they would do once leisure travel restrictions are lifted. So let's take a look at what the responses show us. So first, majority feel safer doing activities with limited exposure to crowds. In the survey question, we asked the respondents to rate how safe they felt doing each of the listed activities. And as you see, we listed down activities that are typical of a leisure trip, you know, joining tours, staying at a hotel, going shopping, dining out, etc. And we asked them to rank this, you know, based on how safe they felt doing this particular activity. And for this graph, we summed up the responses showing, connoting very unsafe or unsafe. And you can see that on this graph. So if we look at the top three or those perceived as most unsafe versus the bottom three or the safest activities, what stands out is that activities that limit exposure to other people, you know, particularly to strangers, inspire the greatest sense of safety for travelers. Activities such as, you know, staying at a hotel or resort where you can hide out in your room or isolate yourself on a private beach, solo travel or backpacking, or going on private tours with just people you know personally. And I assume people you know as being most likely COVID-free. You know? Conversely, activities that expose travelers to crowded places are deemed the least unsafe. Take shared group tours where you're packed with other travelers, though not necessarily in a huge crowd, but in an intimate setting like a van or a bus or a ferry. There's also the sporting events, you know, basketball games, cockfights, etc., and attending conventions or conferences, you know. So these activities are clearly activities that expose you to crowds. Now, in this graph, we get other information that may be of interest to particular industries within the travel value chain. For example, the most and least safe are both tours, just a different implementation. You have shared and then you have the private. So for tour operators, especially those organizing shared tours, how would you respond to this? Another interesting result is how traveling on a commercial airline is viewed by many as being relatively safe. The respondents say it is almost as safe as the dining out and much safer than going to a museum. For the hotel industry, 37% say staying in a hotel or resort is unsafe, while 45% say staying in a B&B or hotels is unsafe. Finally, indoor attractions are supposedly some of the most unsafe activities to do, but dining in a restaurant is considered a lot safer. So how can you convince people that you are at least as safe as restaurants? No? So note that these are all impressions or perceptions and not reality, at least not in the scientific sense. So we asked respondents, about the activities that they see themselves doing once they start traveling again. And they said, going to the beach, sorry, let me just go back. And they said, you know, going to the beach, going on a road trip, and staying in a hotel. So we see some consistency in the responses we were provided. The top three are outdoor or private activities, which we saw in the previous slides. Respondents have deemed relatively safer travel activities. So the next key insight is that travelers prefer online and digital channels for convenience and contact reduction. So across different age groups, respondents overwhelmingly favor online channels for booking travel arrangements. Mostly they book online directly with establishments with online travel agencies as a second online option. In fact, 73% of the respondents say they book travel arrangement through direct online channels. By this, we mean directly on the establishment's websites, like how you go to like maybe the PAL website to book your tickets or to a particular resort's website to make a reservation. 46% say they book online through aggregators, you know, such as Expedia or Skyscanner. Our organization, Guide to the Philippines, also operate in this space as a marketplace for Philippine travel products. Now, in terms of online and offline channels, transacting online is significantly seen as more convenient by most. Perhaps it is the transparency in pricing or the convenience of booking at your own pace. But whatever the reasons are, it's simply clear that businesses cannot afford not to conduct business online. In terms of direct or indirect channels, we see from the respondents that direct bookings, whether online or offline, is preferred over going through agents. This is a good thing for brands. If you're able to develop a strong organic online presence, then this may lead to higher profitability. For travel agents, on the other hand, you know, all is not lost. You also have the option to develop your business online. But you'll have to develop a unique value proposition. Perhaps it could be through niche products, like specific to a destination, or themed products, honeymoon packages, luxury packages. But whatever marketing angle you choose, greater personalization is a value that smaller players have over bigger OTAs. I should note that that booking is not the only digital touch point for customers. 86% of travelers expect self-service processes in the new normal. This includes transactional touch points like self-service check-in, rebooking, refunds processing, and so on. Given the priority on health and safety, limiting contact through transactions with travel vendors is a probable reason for this response. As a travel brand, you have to ask yourself, so how do I cater to these expectations? Travelers prefer booking trips, trip components independently over booking travel packages. 80% of the surveyed travelers said so, while only 20% prefer all-inclusive travel packages. And by components, we mean airline tickets, hotels, tours, transport. When we cross the information of those who book independently, we see that these respondents mainly book online, while those preferring packages tend to be the ones who booked with travel agencies, which is perfectly logical. We also had a question on when travel products are generally purchased. And we see that travel products are booked at varying instances. This supports the previous data on people preferring independent bookings. Big ticket items such as airline tickets and hotel bookings are done generally ahead of time. It should be noted that these components are generally dynamically priced, meaning the price you see depends on the demand. Brands in these industries typically employ revenue management practices with systems using algorithms to maximize yields based on historical demand and forward bookings. Now, tours and attractions generally follow the same trend as accommodation based on the data. So again, some question, is there an opportunity for brands to do more bundling in this case? On the other hand, local transport such as buses and ferries are typically bought in destination. When the travelers are already at their destination. These are usually static priced and have ample supply. So maybe there's not so much incentive to book ahead of time. The next insight, or the sixth insight, is that travelers plan to travel close to home. So in the survey, of course, we had to ask which Philippine destination people expect to travel to next when the situation allows for the return of tourism. And here is the top 10. So as you can see, Boracay is number 1, followed by Siargao, and then Baguio, then Metro Manila. So nothing really too surprising here. These destinations are really popular for tourism. However, it is when we cross this data with the place of residence of these respondents where we see some interesting trends. From this table, we see the top 3 destination choices of respondents from each of the regions in the Philippines. And from what we see, it appears that people expect to travel closer to home in the new normal. For regions in Luzon, we can see the dominance of Luzon destinations for their next travels. In fact, we only have Boracay and Siargao as non-Luzon entries. The trend is seen even better when we go a bit more granular. So those from CAR, for example, lists La Union as their next destination, followed by Baguio. Baguio also figures in most of the Luzon regions. Respondents from the Bicol region, on the other hand, listed Bicol as their response, as their top response for the first destination that they will travel to. For Visayas, Boracay and Cebu are the top destinations. But when we go to Western Visayas, Iloilo is part of their top 3, while those in Central Visayas have Bohol as an option. For Mindanao, Davao and Cagayan de Oro emerge as options. We haven't seen that in the other regions. With those from Davao region opting to tour around Davao, just like we saw the Bicolanos response. There are many curious implications to this data. With it, tourism enterprises should now ask, who will be my first customers when business resumes, and how can you target these local or hyper-local tourists? Or perhaps this can be a roadmap for the gradual reopening of leisure corridors between destinations with very manageable COVID-19 situations like an MGCQ to MGCQ travel corridor, for example. So again, just to reiterate, don't get us wrong, leisure travel is currently out of the question, and rightly so. And we believe that restrictions should only be lifted when it's reasonably safe to do so. So I presented the 6 key insights, and just as a summary, I'll go through them again quickly. So the first was, the first 3 that JP presented is 1, domestic leisure travel will lead Philippine tourism recovery. Second is majority of travelers expect a reduction in income and travel budget. Third, health and safety is the primary concern of travelers. 4, travelers prefer reduced contact activities once leisure travel restrictions are lifted. 5, travelers prefer online and digital channels for convenience and contact reduction. And 6, travelers plan to travel close to home. So now we proceed to the section where we talk about the implications of these findings to tourism enterprises. So as mentioned earlier, the Philippine tourism industry is really among the most affected by the pandemic situation, given all of the travel restrictions. And Sec Berna earlier pointed out that having data on consumer sentiments and behavior is imperative for industry stakeholders in crafting strategies and planning for the new normal. So what are the implications of this data for tourism enterprises? For many, what we presented may be a validation of their current assumptions. Some may say, of course, health and safety are people's top concern, or online is obviously the way to go. But having these assumptions validated, or in some cases invalidated by data, allows us to plan with a greater sense of certainty, a deeper rootedness in reality as defined by our target market. So in the next few slides, we will present implications we gathered based on the insights we've shared earlier. For most part, we try not to be too prescriptive, given the implications will differ from one industry to another, or from one business to another. Instead, our goal is really to guide or provoke introspection on your business in the context of the survey results. Okay. So the first implication is to adapt products and services. In the face of crisis, adaptable and agile businesses are the ones able to navigate uncertainty and avoid disruption. And it starts really by understanding your customers. All enterprises in the travel value chain must continually probe shifting travel behaviors and adapt their offerings based on the changing demands. In our case, it is changes due to COVID-19. Okay. So some items that you can look at, in adapting products and services. One is gather customer data. And there's a place for gut feel assumptions and or anecdotal data in the planning process. After all, we can never get all the data we need. That would be either too expensive, time-consuming, or simply non-existent. But having said that, tourism enterprises must do their best to gather data in order to understand their customers and their needs. And there are many ways to go about it. You can do surveys such as this one, or focus group discussions, or better yet, if you transition online, gather online and transactional behavior. So you can see who's visiting your website, from where, how many users, what's the click-through rate, and so on. Another way to gather customer data would be to do desktop research. Like what we have done here, there are actually many studies and surveys being shared from all over the world, where the fight against this pandemic are in varying stages. So what can we learn from other countries? What can we learn from the behaviors of travelers in those countries? All of these may provide you with leads on how local consumers may act. Next, evaluate your products and services versus the expected travel preferences. So earlier we shared some of these projected changes in the travelers' sentiments or preferences in traveling. Given the data on activities perceived as unsafe or safe by the respondents, or how health and safety best practices are expected, or how travel may be more local, evaluate your products and services and determine how you can repackage them to suit the new needs of travelers. some questions. Maybe should you prepare for more private tours? Or if people opt for more road trips, how can your business provide value for these self-guided tours? How do you manage your amenities to maintain social distancing? I know we are offering more questions and answers at this point, but the businesses are really in the best position to answer these questions, or even determine the right questions to ask. Finally, for adapting products and services, look for ancillary sales opportunities. Given the possible changes to your products and services, perhaps adapting business and revenue models is needed for your business. Are there upsell or cross-sell opportunities you can take advantage of? I finally got a haircut the other day, and so I made reservations with the barbershop nearest my home. When I got to the receptionist handed me a new mask and a pair of plastic gloves. I pointed out that I had a mask on. She said, a new one would ensure that there wouldn't be hair sticking all over it. So fair enough. As I sat down the barber's chair with my new mask and gloves, my barber takes this visor with adhesive and sticks it on my forehead. Then drapes, then takes a huge piece of plastic and drapes them on me in lieu of the regular reusable gown. My barber then, took a new piece of latex gloves and gets on his business. So I sit there. I clearly felt safe from COVID. If the virus can still navigate through all that layer of protection, ewan ko na lang, no? So finally, I was done. I was about to pay and was told that the haircut now costs 500 pesos versus the 300 it was previously. Of course, I expected an increase, but maybe not that much. Now, however, when we think about, when I think of all the disposable protective gear they used, apart from thinking of the environment, I sort of thought it was a little bit justified. I mean, they still have to recover from loss of income over the ACQ. But what my barbershop did was to add a retail sales model on top of their service model. They're no longer just a barbershop, but in essence, a retailer of PPE. Okay, so this is just an example. I'm not saying tourism enterprises should go the same route. The next implication is the need to shift to digital. Having a strong online brand and a robust website with a transactional platform is ideal to engage our digital savvy Filipino market. Online visibility is a necessary condition to thrive in the new normal. But beyond distribution, the future of tourism strongly relies on the creative use of technology. Enterprises will have to move forward with bolder and innovative solutions to shape the future of travel experiences. So in this particular implication of shifting to digital, what are the things that we can do as tourism enterprises? First, it's important to design your customer's experience on digital platforms. Google defined various stages of travel. They have 5 stages: the dreaming, planning, booking, experiencing, and sharing. If you take a look at your business right now, you have to ask yourself, how do you engage with customers on these 5 stages? Google has a very practical recommendation for brand engagement. Google says, brands have to be there, meaning they're seen when people do their searches on Google, and be useful. So the first part, dreaming. Dreaming is about inspiring travel and it's largely content driven. So you have to ask yourself, do your website have write-ups, photos, or videos that inspire travel? If not, I think now is a good opportunity for you to work on that, while there's no traveling going on. Planning next, again, is about content. Are you able to help customers plan an itinerary? Do you make it easy for consumers to compare your offerings with competitors? On the booking stage, do you make it easy to book your products online? Do you allow digital payments and offer instant booking confirmation? If the answer is no, then waste no time and find a way to get your business online. experiencing and sharing nowadays go hand in hand. Since people post almost real time, you have to ask yourself, do you craft experiences that are suitable for sharing? In this implication, next is another recommendation would be to develop a multi-channel online distribution system or strategy. The results that we've shown earlier show that online channels trump offline ones. Therefore, crafting an online distribution strategy is fundamental in this day and age. The results also show that people engage more with direct channels. So it may seem that having your own transactional website is the way to go. Now, this may be good. It's a good strategy for large organizations like airlines or the bigger hotels, because they can allocate the time and resources needed to maintain an engaging website. Or perhaps maybe they already have the brand equity to drive traffic to their website. But for many of the small and medium enterprises, it may be a bit more difficult. So creating a website by itself is not too difficult. There are many website builders that allow you to create your own transactional website for not a lot of money. But driving traffic to your website, however, is a different matter. For this, creating content is critical, and it takes time. So take a look at blogs. The successful ones took years to get to where they are now, and they did this on top of a lot of search engine optimized content. So if you're new, so even if you create a new and beautifully made website, but without content, and without the time needed to let the content rank, then there will be no traffic and there will be no distribution. So I still think that every brand should have a website. But while you're trying to generate traffic on your own website, it's also good to look at the alternatives, and going through online travel agents is one of those alternatives. For one, in many instances, there are no upfront costs to start selling. There are lots of marketplaces out there. As I mentioned, Guide to the Philippines is one. So you benefit from the traffic that these marketplaces generate and are able to reach audiences that you typically would not be able to reach. So just take a look at the many online sellers on Lazada and Shopee. So it's the exact same concept. And finally, having a social media strategy is crucial. Filipinos spend 4 hours and 12 minutes every day on social media. This is a statistic from a 2019 study. And with all the lockdowns, I would not be surprised if that figure has increased significantly. So social media is really a good way to get your brand out there. It's also a good means to communicate your revised value proposition. For example, to share your new health and safety protocols. As with search, content is also very important for social media. So know your target audience and create content relevant to them. And then you can systematically target your audience through paid campaigns to drive visits and sales on your website. So for the next implications, I would like to hand this over the presentation back to JP.
Okay, so to continue what Rabi has discussed, the third implication is rebuild trust and confidence. Now, inspiring trust and confidence in the safety of travel should be the new main priority for tourism enterprises. As the top travel concern in the new normal, compliance to health and safety protocols provide immense value. Moreover, these measures must be communicated to the market effectively. Travelers need transparency of their experience with players throughout the travel value chain. If you want to increase the likelihood of travel, we have to assure travelers of their safety. Now, tourism stakeholders must also design new customer experience around safety and make sure that we all look beyond our own touch points. Make sure that we communicate our safety protocols clearly, be transparent on the accompanying inconveniences, which some deem this now as the new pain points. It is easier to enforce compliance when safety protocols are in place and instructions are clear-cut. This should not be a problem, as we saw that travelers are willing to comply as indicated by our survey result. And in connection with the next implication, as per the DOT partnership model for safe and sustainable tourism, ensuring the safety of visitors to the island or to any destination, to any island destination, is a collective responsibility of everyone, from the various stakeholders inside and outside of the destination. Hence, the last implication is collaborate with stakeholders. Now, while this may sound cliche, the task of rebuilding trust and confidence in travel is a shared responsibility. Collaboration among tourism stakeholders is critical to the success of tourism recovery. Stakeholders need to strengthen their coordination mechanisms with particular attention given to the most vulnerable destinations and segments of the industry. Traveling in the new normal is hinged on an integrated system of stakeholders, which suggests an us versus me mindset. Well, new normal requires the need for a comprehensive understanding of diverse tourism stakeholders for long-term relationship building. And as a matter of general recommendation, tourism stakeholders need to seek convergence points by initiating interactions or joint assessments with other stakeholders in the tourism value chain. Focus discussion on health, safety, and sustainability is very important to ensure local community involvement. And in your discussions, focus on interests. Focus on what's truly important for the industry, not to a single stakeholder. And in a stakeholder consultation, we analyze your interests and their interests. We explore interests. We share our concerns and interests clearly. And through dialogues, we agree on how to expand the pie first before splitting it. Therefore, in summary, so we had our 6 key insights earlier. And from these key insights, we were able to generate 4 key implications that allow us to construct our 4 pillars. So we have here our key insights. We have here our 4 key implications that Rabi and I have discussed earlier, allowing us to generate what we call the 4 pillars of the new normal for tourism, namely agile innovation, digital transformation, elevated safety, and collaborative governance. So many people said that the COVID-19 pandemic killed the tourism industry, but given the data that we were able to gather, there can be a positive spin in this, or a silver lining, again, if I may use that term, that the pandemic does not mean the collapse of the tourism industry, but rather a call for new business models. So one may say that this is easier said than done, but this is the way to go. So we want a better tourism industry. All tourism stakeholders would need to get our acts together and say hello to these 4 pillars of new normal as per our survey results. And after the webinar, so the survey report will be made available to those who participated in the survey last May, those who provided their email addresses, and those who registered in this webinar. Alternatively, you may also access the survey report through this link after the webinar. So on that note, we would like to thank you for listening. So until we can travel again. So for the meantime, we still stay at home, do our national obligation to ensure each and everyone's safety. So we continue to dream, and soon we'll wake up in the Philippines with a revitalized tourism industry.
Thank you, Mr. Ang and Dr. Rivera, for sharing your insights, the results of the survey. Again, the survey was conducted through the collaboration of the Department of Tourism, Guide to the Philippines, the Asian Institute of Management, Dr. Andrew L. Tan Center for Tourism, and the Guide to the Philippines. And to download the report, we will once again flash the QR code and link towards the end of the program. So if you've missed it a while ago, we will once again flash it after the Q&A session. Now, to share with us their insights regarding the survey results, allow me to call on our first member of the panel today, Mr. Jose Jojo Clemente III, President of the Tourism Congress of the Philippines. Sir Jojo, the floor is yours.
Hi, good morning to everyone. Thank you very much for the insights presented with regard to the sentiment survey. To go through the various points, please allow me to read from my notes that I took. No? Yes, leisure travel will be the first to recover, and domestic travel. But I think the sentiment at the moment is that while there is no vaccine, people will travel, but they will assume that the protocols are in place. So that would give them the confidence to travel. So it's quite important for the stakeholders to make sure that the protocols for health and safety are in place to assure potential travelers that it will be safe and their chances of contracting the virus would be quite low, hopefully. Um, International travel we discussed is also dependent on existing protocols of other countries, and that goes both ways, either coming in or going out. And this is why we need to control our cases so that we become a viable destination for them to visit or to come back to. And this is why we are also discussing the travel corridors or the travel bubbles. And those who have the better control of their pandemic situation will be the ones who will gain fastest. And it was meant that regional travel will be the most preferred area or the most preferred means of travel. So yes, the regional will sort of be the test destinations before people start to go farther and farther to see how protocols are being implemented in other countries. So that's for the outbound. And in the same way, our regional neighbors will try to go to the Philippines also to see whether our protocols and our guidelines are also up to standards. Yes, sure will be a part people will travel. And as we've mentioned in various webinars and in studies that we have read, it will travel now, although for leisure, people will be looking for more meaningful and experiential experiences when they go. And it will not be just the run-of-the-mill tours that we had before, where people get on the buses and just do your drive-by tours or stay on the beach for 10 days, 11 days. People will look to be enhanced by their travel. So they will be looking for more activities that will dive into culture, they'll dive into the history, some other stuff like farm tourism. We have been discussing about that as well. So there will be a change in the profile and in the requirements of the tourists when they start coming here. Okay. It was also mentioned that there will be a need for flexibility, yes, in terms of the rates because of the incomes of the people will be reduced as expected and as we're seeing now. So it is very important for us, the stakeholders, to be flexible and have good rates and prices in the meantime. We have to be in this for the long run. And I think most of us or all of us in the industry, the stakeholders are in agreement that we are not out to make big money right now, but the focus right now is try to get tourists to come back first, just make enough money to probably go above break even, just to employ people, to be able to pay the bills, utilities, and things like that. So we have all accepted that business will eventually come back, but I think now is the time for us to be more flexible about it. And again, and as I've also kept on saying, this will take time. This is not going to happen overnight. And we've seen sentiments by various stakeholders that why don't we open now? Why don't we start allowing people in now? You have to remember it's a two-way street. Countries have to allow their nationals to come out. uh, what protocol are we ready with the protocols, things like that. Do we have accessibility? Do we have flights? So again, this will take some time. Um, on that note, when we talk about the what people are willing to spend, we've also been seeing a proliferation of what we call pay now, travel later deals. My personal opinion is that people still do not have the resources right now, even if you give them a low rate. Maybe you will have some takers, but for the most part, we might still experience some difficulties as far as people paying upfront at this moment, or maybe for the next month or two, uh, for pay now, travel later kind of promo. So maybe we have to rethink that as well. Um, okay. And then we also talked about health and safety. Yes, health and safety will determine who will come here and where they will go. Some of the protocols may seem um, a bit harsh, but this will be the standards that travelers will be looking at. And we have to remember also that these protocols that are being implemented right now are temporary. Um, these protocols are not meant to last for 10, 20 years. It is meant to address the current situation and can evolve as the pandemic continues to progress, either whether it upgrades or downgrades, they are adjustable. If you want to start getting business, then these protocols need to be adhered to. And this is something that we cannot stress enough to our stakeholders and to the industry. And we would like to assure also consumers, if you're watching, yes, our stakeholders around the regions are doing their best to adhere and apply and implement these health protocols. On a related matter, while we are doing this, this is also one of the reasons why um, we have not been able to fully open up most of our destinations yet. Our provincial governments, LGUs, are still setting up their health protocols and guidelines. Take the example of Bohol. Their cases might be low, and one can argue that they should be open already, but the provincial government would like to have a testing clinic open or a laboratory open first before allowing tourists. Some LGUs and some provincial governments have also been experiencing an upsurge in infections for one reason or another. So that also prevents them from opening up to tourism. Recently, we have seen Boracay open to Western Visayas travelers at the moment, and I think there will be an evaluation by this week whether domestic tourism will be opened up. But that said, unfortunately, there was an incident right after the BIATF met there, wherein some people violated the protocols, and people are getting scared. So the sentiment is mixed now, whether they will allow to open or to restrict in the meantime. Okay. The most important point here is that we need to get our infection cases or our numbers controlled. This will be the key on how fast tourism will recover. If our numbers go down substantially, then a case can be made as to how fast we can also reopen. Okay. It was also mentioned earlier, yes, make your travelers aware or your clients aware what we have in place as far as our health and safety protocols are concerned. Okay. It was also mentioned that people would want to do or to go to places which are more spread out and more where you have lesser chances for mass tourism. Yes, the advantage of the Philippines is that we have 7,460 islands, so there's a lot to choose from. And people want social distancing, but for us to take advantage of this, we should make sure that our infrastructure is in place. If there is also accessibility. At this moment, at this time, maybe those are some things that are difficult to work on, but these are things that we need to consider once we get to a semblance of normalcy, is that we have to really start developing the various destinations in the country so that we don't have to worry about over-tourism or crowding, which is one of the main concerns of people who travel right now. Yes, revenues may be lower as we limit entries to the country, but it will improve eventually. And as hopefully the pandemic dies down, we can start on making more revenue again, ones that we were used to. Yes, no group travels will be, I don't see group travels or big groups that we were accustomed to restart for some time. And that is just by the nature of this pandemic that we're going through right now. Not to say that it won't be allowed again, but it will be eventually. Okay. Okay. We were also talking about online bookings. And yes, this is expected as more people want to have more say as to where they want to go and how they will do things and how much they will pay for it. And yes, online does have those options. To a certain extent, online bookings serves its purpose. However, what we've also seen during this pandemic or during the last few months of the lockdown, especially when the lockdowns were implemented, was that people were also looking for people to get in touch with as far as their bookings are concerned. And if I may say so, and with all due respect to OTAs and online bookings, those were the vulnerabilities that were seen as far as OTAs were concerned. Those who booked travel agents felt more secure because they had someone that they can call, they can talk to, who can take care of their problems, especially for rebookings, refunds, and so on. That is not a knock on the online booking industry, but it's a statement of more of things that came to pass. And people are really looking for people or companies or establishments that can take care of their needs should something like this happen. Okay, and finally, those destinations that can control their cases will benefit. We talked about the top 5 destinations here, the top 10 destinations. Yes, those were the more popular destinations before the pandemic. But when we look at post-pandemic or even during this time when we will start to reintroduce travel, we need to look at those places that have their protocols, their guidelines in place. And those will be the most popular, not necessarily the top 10 that was mentioned. Okay. But the thing that we have to say before anything else is that the economy needs to get going to generate the disposable income that fuels travel. Okay, people, as the presentations mentioned, will prioritize food, essential items for the next few months or so, as we are doing, even ourselves. So we are doing. Travel is something that is maybe aspirational at this point. Since before the pandemic, we were already at the point where people, it became a necessity. But in the grand scheme of things, now it is more of a non-essential. No? Okay, and then with the implications that were mentioned, just a few points to make. For the first implication that was made, yes, we are looking at possible adjustments to products and services, but they are difficult due to the progression of the pandemic right now. There are too many things up in the air. Even if we try to be proactive, even if you try to adjust, things happen on a daily basis that changes your plan. Good to have a skeleton plan, but it has to be extremely flexible for you to be able to adjust the things that happen. What we know now may be different from what we know a week from now or 2 weeks from now or a month from now, which will cause us to adjust again. Okay, it was also mentioned that we should add ancillary services. Yes, I agree with that. but there's also a perception sometimes, especially if I may use the example used um, with regard to the barbershop. When you start selling other stuff, some people might see it as nickel and diming or too many add-ons to buy. So we have to strike a balance whether we want to do ancillary or what kind of ancillary services we need to do. Okay, shift to digital. Yes, I agree. Updating your websites would be good. Social media is always good, and it's probably the most effective way of doing promotions at this point. However, when we talk about developing multi-channel online setups, that may be more difficult because it needs money or takes finances to perhaps develop an online booking company, or I mean your own booking online engine or your system for your individual company. And this is money that we do not have right now. We would rather keep our money for more essential stuff at the moment. Yes, we understand that digital is important, but we simply may not have the resources to do that. Rebuild trust and confidence. Yes, we definitely agree with that. And that is something that most of us are doing. We have kept in touch with our clients, and we have been apprising them of what's going on. Collaborate with stakeholders. For the most part, I can say that the stakeholders are pretty much in this together. We are in constant touch, especially the TCP. We are in constant touch with the stakeholders in the various regions of the Philippines, and we are talking to each other, what to do, what can we do, how do we cross promote, how do we sell each other when time comes. And then there was also a mention of probably doing new business models. Yes, but right now we have to ensure that we survive first. It's easy to come up with new business models, but we have to ensure that we will survive the next few months or even a year. And this is something that we have been constantly discussing with the Department of Tourism. We have been collaborating with them with regard to inputs for the various pieces of legislation that are now pending in both houses of Congress, which will provide the much needed financial assistance to the industry. And this is something that we continue hammering on. And if I may use this forum, we would like to urge our lawmakers, our both houses of Congress, to please pass those pieces of legislation, those proposed laws, because we are actually we're close to the breaking point as far as a lot of our establishments and our companies are concerned. And we need to act on this now. So thank you very much again for inviting me, and thank you for those valuable inputs that were given to us by AIM. I'll be free to answer questions in a while. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Jojo, for sharing your insights. Now, for our second reactor today, we have Mr. Jose Enrique L. Perez de Tagle, the Vice President for Corporate Communications at the Philippine Airlines. Mr. Perez de Tagle is an aviation industry executive with 35 years of service for the Philippine Airlines. He is presently the head of the flag carrier's corporate communications team. In his previous capacity as PAL's Assistant Vice President for Government and External Affairs, he served as PAL representative to the Philippine Air Panel and took part in negotiations with over 53 countries to forge air services agreements that expand access to the Philippines' global tourism markets. As chairman of the Board of Airline Representatives in the Philippines from 2014 to 2017, he has helped lead the advocacy efforts of 34 member airlines on a range of aviation industry issues. Let us welcome Mr. Perez de Tagle.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. Okay, first of all, we want to thank the organizers and the people who put together the survey, because they offer us now a glimmer of hope. We need data. We are going by gut feel to a certain extent, and the more data we get, the better it is for us to be able to chart the future, the airlines, tourism industry, everybody. And of course, that glimmer of hope means we also have a call to action. If I recall, the survey said we must the results said that we must be safe and be perceived as safe. We must be agile. We have to be very nimble in how we respond to the way the market will grow in the coming months. And at the same time, we have to be digital and we have to collaborate. So we really have to look at this from an industry viewpoint. And that is true also for the airline industry. Now I'll try to see if I can share my screen. Okay, so we have a few slides to go by here. Thank you. Can everyone see it on the screen? Okay, anyway, for the airlines, a very, very quick rundown that this is, of course, a super major impact on us. A lot of jobs are at stake. We have lots of airplanes that have been parked because of all the lockdowns. So we really have to focus on the coming recovery. In the Philippines alone, there have been more than 30,000 flights canceled in the past few months because of the quarantines. And this has affected more than 5 million passengers by one estimate, domestic, international, all told. No? So that's a major impact, and that's a lot of ground we have to cover in the coming months. And of course, we have to remember that what the airlines can do is, of course, help in the support jobs all over the tourism sector. Okay, based on what the survey brought out, it kind of tracks with what we have also discovered in our own internal surveys in Philippine Airlines. We believe that the next 6-7 months are still going to be very, very tough. We don't see it as a full new normal yet, but we even until December 2020 and maybe even beyond, we are still going to be in the struggling and restoration stage, right? Especially once the travel restrictions are fully out, then maybe we can have a more stable platform to be able to offer regular air services. And it's only by January at the earliest that we can have some semblance of normal, so we can have a transition now to really selling domestic and international services to the world. But again, that will also take time because we expect that as an industry, we'll only reach full recovery by 2023. So that's a lot of ground to cover, as I said. Now, in the past few months of lockdown, airlines have not been sleeping. Okay, yes, our regular flights have been canceled, but Philippine Airlines, for example, has been trying to, well, reinvent ourselves. We've become more and more of a cargo airline because we said our airplanes could also be used to help preserve the critical supply chains, including carriage of PPE, medicines, equipment, and all the kinds of goods that are needed to keep communities thriving. At the same time, we've operated hundreds of charters and repatriation flights to bring not just foreign nationals back to their home countries, but also to bring many of our Pinoy kababayans from all over the world. In fact, we've ended up flying from places we've never thought of, like the Maldives, Barbados, Miami, Milan, and so on. And the list goes on. Just to give everyone perspective, these hundreds of flights are still very, very small compared to our normal, regular day of operation, where we have about 300 flights every single day. So there's, again, a lot of ground to recover from. Now the focus is, the survey told us that we have to really strengthen our safety protocols, everyone in the industry. For the airlines, that is of course our #1 concern. We have to rebuild passenger confidence in travel, and the only way we can do that is to really redefine our product. That's why PAL, for example, was one of the first airlines in the world, in fact I'm told we were the second one, to insist that all our cabin crew will be wearing full PPE from head to foot, no? Including face shields, masks, and so on. And we thought it might scare off some people, but apparently our passengers appreciate this. But on top of that, of course, we have to intensify cleaning and disinfection of all our cabins, because the perception for most people is that the aircraft cabin is a confined space. But the good news about that is it's actually a very controlled environment, because we have in all our aircraft cabin airflow that pushes air from the ceiling all the way to the floor. So it's always up and down, and that is not conducive to the spread of viruses. Second, the air in the cabins are changed every 2 to 3 minutes. So this is a new change. It's not stagnant air, definitely. And when we do that, we filter the air for using our HEPA filters on board. So basically, we screen out nearly all of the viruses. So that's another important safety implication for flying. But beyond that, of course, we have to have a full set of protocols. It's not just in the airplane, but in all the various touch points, customer touch points, all the places we encounter our travelers, whether it's check-in and online bookings, a more contactless environment for everyone. We do thermal scanning at the airports. We work with the airport authorities to make sure that everyone is properly screened. We enforce social distancing in the check-in counters and the gates, and the shuttle buses and all that. We even redefined meal service on board the aircraft. So now we offer packaged meals rather than the old, more traditional way of offering trays and your non-packaged drinks to our passengers. At the same time, we also make sure that the layers, we call them layers of protection that are there, are backed up by a full medical system. Now we are plugged into our own in-house medical teams as well as with the health authorities all over the world. And that's a very important safety measure that we can assure all our travelers that flying can actually be safe. And for the past 3 or so months that we've been operating flights during the COVID pandemic itself, we are glad to note that there has been no recorded case of transmission of the virus between and among our passengers or between and among our crew. That's a good milestone, and it gives us confidence that we are doing the right thing going forward, especially as we increase more and more flights. And of course, in the airline industry, our DNA is really safety. So it's not just a matter of putting the measures on board, but sustaining them. So we have to keep on doing that. We have to really have rigor and discipline in the way we enforce this all throughout. Okay, looking forward, we are really hoping to help kickstart the economy because airline services are going to be helping the Philippine economy recover, no matter how you see it, whether it's trade or travel and definitely tourism, as we're talking about today, we will be there for them. So we are planning, of course, a phased-in rebuild of our flights. Now that we have started operations, we will start with some domestic routes and international scheduled routes and eventually build up to where we need to be. And that's why the survey results are helpful because then we'll be able to adjust and reshape this as we go along once the actual non-essential travel or leisure travel is allowed to start. So last July 1st, or June 1st rather, we finally went back to regular flights, but still, I caution you, although we're back with international flights and domestic flights, we're still talking about a limited number of routes and a limited number of frequencies, especially since today, people can only travel for essential reasons, right? Going back home, going out to, as OFWs to take up their jobs abroad, and so on. Or domestically, we of course are catering only to the locally stranded individuals and the people who really have essential business reasons to travel. We are not yet back in that stage where we are offering leisure travel options for our passengers. It's not allowed and it's not yet the right thing to do. So we will only get back there from, in time and when it's needed. But whatever it is, looking forward, we and all airlines, of course, are here to help the economy recover. We indeed have to take all our efforts to restore and build travel demand, starting with, of course, domestic, which is a very, very clear finding of our survey that we can only expect to start with domestic leisure travel, and because people really want to travel shorter distances rather than long distances. But we are also offering our global air links today because we know some people really need to travel. They have to go home, they have to go to their workspaces and all around the world. And that means we still have some limited flights to the USA, to Canada, to Europe, to Australia, and of course all over Asia. and we will build that up as we go along. Because eventually, international travel will be back and international tourism will also be back. At the same time, we have to reshape aviation in general. So that's a daunting task for our airlines. We're now looking to see what are we going to offer in the coming months when the real leisure travel and business travel resumes. Are we going to be as big as we are today? Are we going to be smaller? Are we going to redefine our network, our routes, and our products, and so on? Definitely, we will have to be agile no matter how you put it. And one example, for us is PAL, we may have to operate more cargo flights. So we have to repurpose some of our aircraft to fly cargo rather than just passenger. But yes, demand will come back, maybe not roaring back, but it will be built back, and we will be there to serve it. And finally, of course, the survey mentioned that we must have a collaborative approach, and that is very, very important because we will definitely have to work with governments and other industry stakeholders. When we started domestic a few weeks ago, there were lots of stops and starts on different routes. Why? Because even though the rules may have been clear at some point, the various LGUs had their own concerns. Every provincial or regional area of the country had its own concerns and its own challenges in setting up their protocols, making sure they have the hospital capacity to handle possible COVID cases and so on. And we ended up working with them, government by government, LGU by LGU, and there's just no other way forward. Because even when we have normal travel, we'll have to work with the various LGUs so that we can make sure that what we offer as airlines will support the communities, their livelihood, their employment, all their prospects. So that's something we can't set aside. And that is true also for working with our travel agent partners, the hotels, the tour operators, and all the other stakeholders who make travel possible and make the industry thrive. So if the question is, are we ready to travel again? My answer to that is, as airlines, we are doing everything we can, from safety to product to mission, to make sure that we are actually ready to serve them and ready to cater to what they need. So it's a long road ahead, but let's fly it together. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Josen, for sharing your insights with us. Now, for our third reactor for today, we have Ms. Mariglo Laririn, who is the Director of Sustainability of the 10 Knots Group Resorts in Northern Palawan, Philippines. These resorts are the most awarded and recognized in the country for their sustainable tourism practices that have become the benchmark in the region. Under her leadership, community engagement and environmental stewardship are two of the company's quadruple bottom line, against which company performance is measured. Sustainably designed resorts, low carbon footprint menus, ecological waste management, habitat conservation, community outreach, activities that allow guests to tread on nature lightly, and many other similar initiatives are aligned with providing guests distinct nature based and highly quality leisure experiences. To achieve this, Ms. Mariglo and her team of environmental officers work with many sectors, including government units, NGOs, community cooperatives, and the academe. For over 10 years now, Ms. Mariglo has been head and truster of the Asian Conservation Foundation. She was responsible for the coordination and implementation of its projects that include a carbon offset program for a small airline that serviced El Nido, protection of giant clams, and assisting a village-based marine sanctuary and a mangrove ecotour enterprise for out-of-school youth. Ms. Mariglo and her family relocated to El Nido from Manila in 1999 and have been of service to the local community in various ways. Let us welcome Ms. Mariglo Laririn.
Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be part of this distinguished panel. I'd like to thank DOT and AIM for finally giving us basis for our to navigate our future, because data always helps and is always valuable. When I was asked to participate, I came up with my own list of concerns, having in mind a traveler persona, a montage of people I came in contact with over the past 25 years that I have been in this industry. So it enthuses me to see that the pillars that the survey came up with are very much similar to what I had in mind, except that I would focus on, as part of the tourism enterprise, the tourism providers of services, I would like to think of our situation as a balancing act rather than a pillar. Slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, I actually cannot see my slides, but I came up with 4 concerns, and these concerns I was thinking for all of us in the tourism enterprise collective. The first one would be the safety and health concerns of everyone. The key thing is, can we see the slides? I actually cannot see it. Anyway, so the first thing is people are going to be very safety and health conscious. But obviously people are going on vacation, so they could not have a hospital feel. Hello?
Miss Mariglo, we're trying to share your slide po.
Okay, sorry. I thought I got cut. Yeah.
It's okay.
Okay. So I was saying earlier, it's very essential for us in the tourism industry, especially in the accommodation sector. Yes, there you go. So I was saying earlier that when I came up with the concerns that I thought I'd like to share with you before seeing the results of the survey, I was thinking of this as a balancing act rather than a pillar. But it doesn't really matter whichever way you put it. The key thing is that we understand there are a lot of common concerns across the board. So the first one I said was the safety and health concerns. All of us are by now familiar with the protocol that accommodations have to adhere to. Next slide, please, Ayla. There you go. But we have to bear in mind that people are going on vacation. These are leisure travelers we're thinking of. So it's very important for people to still feel that they're on vacation and not, having a trip to the hospital. There will be a preponderance of PPEs, masks, everywhere they look, everywhere they go. So obviously, they will not be able to escape the fact that as they are traveling, this is a world that has have to come to live with the reality of the virus. I try to stay away from the word post-COVID because I think that the virus will be very much around until I don't know for how long. But the idea here is for us to push for traveling in spite of the fact that we are going to be at risk. So what we're trying to do is to just minimize the risk or put it within a manageable level. So imagine a place where you will be sharing space with some people, and we Filipinos are going to have to adjust to this because we're obviously very comfortable with being too close with each other. We're very touchy-feely, but now this is going to be the new normal. And the most important thing is for us in the accommodation sector and for those who provide other tourism services, to be able to communicate clearly with our audiences, with our partners in the travel industry, to make sure that before people come and visit these destinations, before they decide on which hotels to stay, if and when they travel, all these things have already been explained to them. So the expectations are there, and these expectations should be met because safety and health concerns are at the very top of everyone's mind. So it's bad enough that people are very worried, very concerned, but then it's also going to be even worse if when they go there looking for a vacation, they feel like they're actually going to a hospice or a hospital. So the balance is going to be tough for those of us in the accommodation sector. Next is accessibility. In the survey, it's very clear that people are not too keen yet on traveling far and doing long-haul travels, and that's very, very understandable. So accessibility should come in short-haul forms, and as much as possible, you know, in modes of transportation that will deliver people from point to point. You know, different plane changes will have to wait for quite some time. Layovers in airports, those are not exactly what people have in mind at the moment, not to mention the fact that it's going to be very expensive. So that's the tension there. How do we make travel accessible, okay, by these point-to-point experiences, one island to the other, let's say from Manila to a specific island destination, but without having that part of the vacation take up a huge part of the budget. So in other words, airlines will have to pay very close attention to what people are able to spend and what people are able to demand, because point-to-point transport is not necessarily cheap, even pre-COVID. The next concern in our balancing act, next slide please, is something that I'd like to spend a little bit time on. Next slide please. It is about low density experiences that we hope would be able to deliver high quality to our customers and to our guests. Ayla? There you go. Okay. So low density travel experiences is validated in the survey, where repeatedly people express their aversion to close contact with others, especially those that are not part of their travel group. So we can imagine experiences to be, you know, more bespoke than ever before. What we call, let's say, the top 10 destinations or hotspots, or those that were frequented by tourists in the past. Those are the destinations that I think will take a little more time to recover, because people are going to be avoiding them when they know that there'll be a whole lot of others who will be going to these destinations. So low density experiences is what resorts, especially island resorts like El Nido resorts and several other island resorts in this country, actually live for. So I think that we are equipped to do this. We're equipped to reimagine what our guests would actually appreciate. So these low density experiences, which would be for higher quality, may have the following features. One is what they call being off the beaten track. Social distancing protocols and the visible negative effects of over-tourism. Travelers will not want to be with tourism crowds. So exploring less populated destinations may be a solution. And to combat the phobia or the risk that crowding brings, we should be able to bring travelers to different places at different times. Obviously, some destinations will lend themselves to be more flexible than others, but this is really a time for us in the industry to explore ways to slow down the flow of travelers, but we have to remain authentic as well. So it really is not an easy task. The other feature of low density experiences would be slow travel. We have to allow travelers now to enjoy the destination at a slower pace than we are used to. We went from over-tourism to zero tourism overnight. So these are things that we will have to relearn if we have forgotten how it is to travel slowly. There will also be an increased interest in outdoor activities. So most travelers who have been in lockdown will hopefully have a greater appreciation now for nature. The next feature of this is that we should anticipate less frequent, but hopefully longer haul travels. I know that the survey says people are still willing to travel for 2 to 3 days, and budget has a lot to play, a role to play in that decision, I suppose. But we have to understand when we travel off beaten tracks, and if we want to decide to travel at a slower pace rather, we have to understand that we might have to provide a little more time. And so our travels that used to be frenetic, our travels that used to be a compilation of destinations may be less frequent than in the previous years. Okay, the other feature is that there will be a lot of local travel. This has been repeated by our speakers previously. And that's great, because in the Philippines, we are a demographic sweet spot economically. We're over 100 million Filipinos. We have several islands. We're a fantastic archipelago. But the tension there, the balance that I've been trying to focus on, is that Filipinos are also, we're very curious about other people's destinations, about other people's cultures. So while we all believe that domestic travel will be the key to reopening our tourism industry, we in this accommodation sector, we in the services sector have to understand that people don't want to visit destinations that they're very, very familiar with. We're always looking for something new, whether it be a new festival or a new dish or whatever else. In other words, simply because the survey says that domestic travel will be, the way forward, we cannot be complacent about the fact that Filipinos are also very discerning travelers, and that we have to reinvent the way we offer our services, being Filipinos too. Next one is high quality, low density. The offerings should be good for the soul. I think the pandemic really shook us all to the core, and people would want to make their traveling really, really worth it. So they will want to look for destinations that will make their money count the most, not just for themselves, but for the communities that depend on those businesses. And then finally, we have to be very personal and flexible. So personal service, tailored experiences, these are all important aspects, even pre-COVID, but even more so, we have to understand that these are more essential. Travelers need to care, and travelers need to be cared for. So these are things that we might want to bear in mind. And finally, number 4 in this balancing act that I have been thinking about is a commitment to sustainability. Okay, we are in a pandemic. Our industry has been very, very badly hit. A lot of us businesses have fallen flat on our faces, and these are all facts. It's going to take a while for us to recover, but our commitment to sustainability and financial profitability at the same time shouldn't waver. And they may take on smaller scales than ever before, but the key thing is for us to continue to engage in our communications with other members of our value chain. Local government units have a great role to play in ensuring that destinations are able to reopen. So we have to constantly engage with them, even while we're on a major slowdown, or perhaps because we are in a major slowdown, we should be able to engage local partners, local governments, NGOs who are concerned about conservation of the environment, because with no tourism comes an increase, an uptick in illegal activities that impinge on the integrity of the environment. That is a fact that has been documented. So now is the time for us as an industry, as a collective, to be able to show how much we care for our environment and for the local communities that host us. So in all these things, last slide, please. Last slide, please. Okay. I would like to enjoin all my fellow members of tourism enterprises, all of us who provide services to travelers. I'd like to enjoin everyone to think about why people travel. And once again, take this as an opportunity for us to refocus on the traveler, to look at people as people who have needs. The need to travel is something that we've all recognized, which is why we're in this industry. To stop for a moment to think about people as markets, as demographics, but people as people like us. Why do we travel? We need to heal. We need to reinvigorate. We need to be inspired. Last night, I got a call from a friend who's a pulmonologist. She's been at the front line since the start of this crisis. And she was asking me, when exactly are you guys going to reopen and start taking in leisure travelers? They are very, very tired. They're very burnt out. And so there's a whole lot of them who just really want to be able to rest and replenish and heal. And also because we are a curious lot. As human beings, our curiosity cannot be expunged, and travel has become fundamental to life as we know it. So as we think about these things, among all of us in this sector, we should be able to come up with, well, yes, earlier it was a mention of coming up with new business models, but I think a recommitment to providing unique experiences, refreshing experiences to travelers all over the world will be able to push us to move forward, and also to be enlightened in what strategies we can adapt to be able to attend to these needs, even as we come to terms with the challenges of this new normal. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mariglo, for sharing your insights with us. And finally, the last member of our panel today is Assistant Secretary Roberto P. Alabado III of the Tourism Development Planning of the Department of Tourism. Asik Robbie.
So, good noon to everyone from the Department of Tourism. I would like to say have a good lunch if you're having lunch right now. Anyway, I would like to have some comments regarding the report that was given to us earlier by AAM. And one thing I saw in the respondents, there were more of the, as what was earlier reported, these are the millennials. These are, and the young family. I think it's about up to 40 years old. So these are the people who would like to travel. This is a generation of people who would like to travel. And I see that there was a rise in the willingness to travel, because NEDA before 2 months ago, I think, had a good survey also on the willingness to travel, and it showed a very low willingness to travel for Filipinos in that study. So I think it was just like only 28% of Filipinos or respondents in that survey were willing to travel, but now it's going up. So I think that maybe the confidence to travel is also going up. Let's hope. So, and I saw also in the report that most of Filipinos or respondents were looking at weekend travels. That's why it's 2 to 3 days. And I think this gives an opportunity for us to know that while they're working, they are going to be earning money, so that maybe later during a weekend or a long weekend, they can go on vacation. And that speaks well of our, perhaps one of the solutions was said to be holiday economics. I think it might work for this. And one curious thing about the answer was more on sun and beach. They want to go sun and beach, and I think Ma'am Stella is part of that. And they want sun and beach, and they want to go to Boracay, and most of them come from NCR. And we're looking at they want to travel, but at this, they don't want to travel, but Boracay is the primary spot that they want to. I just hope that that may be because of the less than an hour of air travel that it takes. So parang it's just like from Quezon City to Makati. So, but at the same time, I'm looking at uh, an opportunity for our local government units. I've seen a lot of local government units in our audience, and let us show them that Boracay is not the only one with sun and beach. Nakakatakot na we're looking at Boracay and everyone would like to go to Boracay. Then what social or physical distancing then? How would that cope with our protocols? But if we can show them, every LGU in Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao can show the fabulous beaches that we have also, then I think this is an opportunity for all of us to showcase our beaches, because Sun and Beach is said to be one of the top wishes of Filipinos in this study. And we're looking at the top concern on health and safety. And yes, the Department of Tourism is really, really bent on it. We have been doing our plans since the start of the pandemic. Let me show you these plans. Okay. And okay, so we're looking at a tourism plan that we call the TRRP. Okay, so if we're going to look at the TRRP, that's Tourism Response and Recovery Program. When we say response, that's immediate. And immediately we had a lot of activities, but at the same time, we're going on the recovery plan. And we're looking at, just like PAL, we're looking at recovery to start July, but it's going to really start next year. And what we're looking right now, this June up to December, it's a period of recoil, we call it. Recoil will be a time where there are different levels of maybe ECQ, CQs, GCQ in all over the country. There's even a question kanina, if we're going to have a second wave. That's part of the recoil. So this next 6 months is very crucial for us. And we're looking at this plan, looking at the beneficiaries like the primary tourism establishments, accommodation, the transportation, tour guides, and tour operators, secondary tourism establishments, and the informal sector. Earlier, we had one of the questions was how would we handle itong mga cultural tourism participants natin? And I saw them in Bohol. There were those who were providing entertainment, very good entertainment during the river cruise. And my heart bleeds for them, but at the same time, I hope that the local government and the national government agencies who are in charge of providing for the informal sector will be able to provide them with the help. And at the same time, we're looking at the DOT accredited na mga establishments. So there was a question earlier saying, asking that will DOT provide information on those who are safe and who are following the protocols? Yes, we have what we, the IATF has said that if an accommodation or a resort or a hotel would have to operate, then it must have clearance coming from the Department of Tourism, who will ensure that they are going to follow the protocols set by the IATF on health and safety standards. So if you are going out to have a vacation, ensure to have that, what we call the CAO, the certificate of authority to operate. Okay, so only those who have the CAO are allowed to operate. Okay, so key outcomes that we have been doing is, number one, protecting the visitors and tourist workers. We have been, example of this would be the the stranded tourists. We had flights all over the Philippines just to secure them. And ensuring business survival, Mr. Jojo Clemente was saying that the rule of the game right now is business survival. That is what we're doing. And we're talking with the national government to provide financial support to our tourism establishments at this moment. Then we have to build back better by adopting to the new normal. So this is, we have to make our seaports, airports, and land transportation terminals safe for all tourists. And last would be enhancing marketing and market and product development. So we're looking right now at the confidence to travel. And we're saying that, okay, people will have confidence to travel once the destination or the tour or the tourist establishment has established itself as a follower of the safety protocols that the government has given. And this is now a key thing that we're looking at. The Department of Tourism is working with TCP and other LGUs on ensuring that our tourists are safe when they're going to travel. But it's not just the tourists alone, but also the local communities themselves. And this can be done if the whole chain of the whole value chain. It's not just the hotels, it's not just the resorts, it's not just, it should include the pasalubong centers, it should include the van operators, the tourist van operators, it should include the tour operators. The whole value chain of tourism should work together and ensuring that each one should follow the safety protocols that are that's going to make the tourist more confident to travel or to visit our LGU or our destination. Do you remember the game? Weakest link? So if we have someone in our tourism value chain as not following the safety protocols, then the whole chain is affected. This is very crucial right now. And for my recommendation for our private and local government units, it has been emphasized over and over again. Whatever happened before is not there anymore. We have to reimagine what is going to happen right now. And I'm very glad that we have this survey because it points to the direction that we have to prioritize experience. We have to prioritize having a low density travel. We have to emphasize safety protocols. And I think we have a lot of these right now. We just have to enhance them and we just have to rediscover them. For example, for our tour guides here, why don't you do the unusual tours? Because right now, people would prefer not to be with other strangers in a tour. So create tour packages that would allow families to go out together. Don't put them, they are not confident right now to be jammed in a bus with other strangers. Now is an opportunity to have low numbers, but at the same time, you could maximize the experience. That's why when we have cultural tourism, it's not just the eyes. It includes the smell. It includes the taste. It includes our hands. Make that experience for them, the cultural experience. But at the same time, we see the opportunity right now for farm tourism. Farm tourism is, it's leisure. At least you're going out to somewhere green, and at the same time, you're going to be eating healthy food, wellness, and at the same time, learn new skills. A lot of us right now have been doing urban farming. And I think going to these areas right now, if you're in Manila, you go to Calabarzon, there's a lot of farm tourism sites there. And you could interact on how can you even enhance your own food production. And we're looking at a nature-based tourism. These nature-based tourism, I think hiking, we have to enhance our fitness right now. Ito po yung mga nakikita in the international level. And I think in the local level, it's also there. We have to eat healthy food. We have to exercise. We have to strengthen our immune system. And these are priorities now of many tourists. So for um, the reduced contact, this is what we have to do in those who are into product development and tour operations. Do this, and I think we will be able to surpass the expectations of people. We start with the domestic. When we were looking at what will start the tourism industry, exactly, it's going to be the domestic. But we have to also ensure that our domestic market will have health and safety protocols in place. Medyo mahirap po to because we have a lot of people who are going to go around. But if we all cooperate, I think we can help tourism, the tourism industry. Just think, we have more than 5 million people who are working for the tourism industry. We have to support them, and we have to ensure that everyone is also safe. So on the last note, we're talking of where are they going to go? Yes, we are going to the next municipality right now. We're going to the next province. We're going to the next region before we have that enough confidence to go to the next island. And this now allows our locals and local tourism establishments to repackage their areas so that I've seen some destinations that cater only to tourists outside. And right now, let's open our resorts, let's open our tours to our locals, because our locals also would like to support you, and at the same time they would like to help support the industry. So we're looking at, number one, I'm now answering questions online. Okay, in terms of the airport, good news. We've been talking with the Bureau of Immigration, and they will surprise us with a new app and new protocols. They're going to totally contactless. Your entry and your departure from the Philippines will be contactless. So let's wait for that. And for the Airbnb, yes, Airbnb and the Department of Tourism, we're now talking with each other, and we want to ensure that all those who are into Airbnb will be registered under the Department of Tourism so that they will follow national protocols, because every one of us have to have certain standards so that we can ensure the safety of our tourists. And another question earlier was more on the medical facilities. Yes, we have some LGUs right now who are hesitant to open up their destinations. They want to prepare first their hospitals. They want to prepare first their local health facilities, so that if ever something happens, they are prepared. Or as was earlier said, what if there's going to be a second wave? So LGUs right now are preparing their destinations for any eventuality right now. And I think this is now an opportunity for everyone of us to upgrade the level of services that we have. So for the Department of Tourism, we are going to encourage domestic tourism, because it is one way of restarting the tourism industry. Once we have restarted our tourism industry through the domestic tourism, then eventually the international visitors will see us having fun and doing it in a safe environment, and perhaps they will now be enticed to go to the Philippines. Daghang salamat. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, ASIC Robbie, for your insights and also for answering some of the questions that we have in our Q&A panel. So now, again, thank you very much to our panelists, Mr. Clemente, Mr. Perez de Tagle, Ms. Laririt, and Asik Alabado for sharing your insights with us. Now we want to hear our audience for your thoughts and opinions and comments as well. So please feel free to post your questions in the Q&A panel of Zoom. We will now be selecting some of the questions to be answered live today. So now, let's call on our panelists again and presenters a while ago. So we have here the first question. You may for all of this for the speakers and panelists, you may feel free to answer should you think it's relevant to your uh, field. So first is it's been recognized that many tourist destinations do not have adequate health and medical facilities to address emergency situations. How are we planning to address this, or how can we address this?
Okay, so for as what I said in the Department of Tourism, we are coordinating with the Department of Health in prioritizing the destinations that we have, because most of our destinations, our top destinations, are actually in rural areas. And they are not in cities where we have tertiary level hospitals, but they are located in small municipalities, because these have the best nature-based tourism environment. So the Department of Health right now has a program focusing on these destinations so that we can upgrade the level of service of the health facilities there. So there's El Nido, there's Siargao, DOH is Boracay. They're concentrating resources now on those areas.
Thank you, Asek. So I guess another question that our other panelists can answer, with the concern on health and safety and measures identified to combat COVID-19, such as rapid testing and travel insurance, travel will definitely be more expensive. Now, how do we plan to encourage domestic tourists to travel?
If I may answer, that's one of the questions now that are being asked, but and it's a difficult question to answer, honestly and candidly. Yes, there will be a premium for safety, of course, and we are hoping that stakeholders will be able to minimize the effect on the bottom line as far as the rates that we pass on to our guests are concerned. But the bottom line is that they will probably need to shell out just a little bit. But for me, personally, if I was traveling and I paid this much money to be assured that where I'm going is going to be safe, and that I won't really need to worry about catching the virus once I'm there, for me, it's well worth it. And I think the service will also bear that out, that those are the things that people are looking for. So if they're willing to travel, they must also be able to expect that they will pay a little bit more. And that is just to manage the expectations of these travelers.
Thank you, Sir Jojo. How about our other panelists? Would you like to share your insights?
I think that question really for
sorry.
Yes, well, Ms. Mariglo.
Yes. Well, I second what Jojo said. That's a tough question to ask and answer, actually, because the truth is it's going to be costlier than before, and those destinations that have already been labeled as rather on the high side compared to the others will probably bear the brunt of people not even wanting to consider. But then we also have to think about the fact that we will be, as I was mentioning earlier, creating new experiences that will, well, to begin with, we are allowed 50% of what our usual occupancies are as we start to reopen. So from that alone, you can see, how much clambering there will be for prices to make it viable for us to run our businesses. So I have no quick and fast answer, other than that perhaps people will really be thinking about which destinations they will prioritize this coming year. And as I mentioned earlier, there will be less frequent traveling happening. And hopefully, as people think about, the one or two destinations that they will really visit, it will be a destination that's worth it. So what we can promise perhaps is good value for money, in as much as we cannot promise lower rates at the moment.
Thank you, Ms. Mariglo.
Okay,
Yes.
if I could add,
Yes, sir.
thank you. Well, for the airlines and for PAL in particular, we of course have to be candid that the costs of safety are going to go up. All these measures that we put in, all the layers, this will cost a lot of money for the airlines and for all the stakeholders who are really actually involved. At the same time, however, we have to balance this out because we know that many of our travelers are not going to have the same disposable income, and there will be many economic challenges in the coming months as well. So we really have to find the right kind of balance to be able to give a good value, affordable product, at the same time to be able to pay for the cost of all the safety measures. And do we know how we're going to do this? We're going to find out. It's really going to be a challenge going forward. When maybe for us, for example, in PAL, we have not increased our fares. We don't plan to increase our fares, certainly, but you might see a little less of the usual promotions and all, because again, the bottom line is going to matter very much so in the coming months. But we'll see again, because again, we also have to jumpstart travel, and that will be part of the challenge.
Thank you, Sir Josen. So any last thoughts from our presenters, Abby and JP? You're good. Okay. So unfortunately, that will be the last question that will be answered live. However, given the time constraints, the rest of your questions may be answered by our panelists privately through the Q&A panel below in the Zoom. Right? So again, thank you very much for our very active audience for participating in our Q&A session. Now, to synthesize and formally close today's event, I would like to call on Professor Fernando Martin Y. Rojas, Executive Director of the AIM Dr. Andrew L. Tan Center for Tourism.
Thank you, Ayla. In behalf of Dr. Twinkle Rodolfo, the Tourism Center would like to thank especially Secretary Berna and ASEC Howie for joining us today. We'd also like to thank our reactors and participants, Jojo Clemente, Mariglo, and Josen, for sharing their insights this morning. And in closing, and I'll make this very short, I was listening to everything that's been said, and by Robbie and JP, who did a tremendous job today. My thoughts are that the rate which the industry will recover will depend upon how quickly we can change our attitudes about tourism. We in the center are of the opinion that the old world tourism might never come back. I think given what we've heard today, the product has changed because the needs of the customers have changed. So we have to redefine many of the things that we've taken for granted. And I leave it there because this will not be the last webinar that we will have on the subject matter. So thank you very much to everybody who's joined us this morning, and see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Rojas. Now, on behalf of the organizer of today's event, I would like to thank everyone for taking time to participate in this webinar. Now, as promised previously, you may access the full copy of the report by scanning the QR code or accessing the link that will be flashed now on your screens. So there you go. Please be informed that your registration details and personal data is jointly shared between the following webinar organizers: the AIM School of Executive Education and Lifelong Learning, the AIM Dr. Andrew L. Tan Center for Tourism, the Department of Tourism, and the Guide to the Philippines. We hope you enjoyed this webinar. Keep in touch and stay tuned for our upcoming webinars and programs. Thank you and have a nice day.